Mr. Johnson,
Present.
Don Lofty,
Present.
Mike Bessel,
Present.
Jeff Baysmith,
Present.
Tom Breinstein,
Here.
and Joan Vichot.
Here.
And I believe that is a quorum. In fact, I believe it's a full house, Mr.
We have a full house.
And we will then turn to the minutes of the meeting of April 14th. Those minutes have been circulated to the board. Do I have a motion to accept those minutes as circulated?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Let me welcome everybody to this rather unique meeting in Glendale. It is a hybrid meeting of both in-person and Zoom. And you'll have to bear with us as we experiment with this new format. It's been a while since we've actually done something like this. But I think with cooperation, we'll all get through it. This, in fact, is the first in-person meeting with significant public participation since our March 2nd, 2020 council meeting before the pandemic really began in earnest. So it's a milestone. It looks like the governor is going to be removing a lot of the COVID restrictions on June 2nd, I believe. And we're just getting a little bit ahead of the game here, but we are still very legal. And we have also still fulfilled all of the legal state requirements for holding a meeting, a virtual meeting by Zoom. So we just very briefly, it looks like I don't see anybody here wearing a mask. Okay, sorry. They are optional at this meeting. Feel free to, if you feel more comfortable distancing yourself. We tried to start with chairs being 6 feet apart, but we also recognize that some of you are sitting with bubble mates, and if that's a word. And so we're, you're welcome to stay with people you choose to sit with. This is the beginning of a public discussion, and in that regard, it's also somewhat unusual. It's more like a public hearing, in-town meeting, and we have 15 people who have registered to speak. We have allotted 1 hour for each speaker, divided the time evenly. It means that everybody gets 4 minutes. If at the end of that time, and David Lumsden, our administrator, will keep track of the time. If at the end of that there is still an appetite for further discussion, the board can consider it, but also the board will want to have some time on its own to hash out some of what it has heard and some of what it's been thinking about this. If people wish to put questions to the board is certainly free to answer them as they see fit. I will tell you that the time that a board member spends answering a question will be part of the speaker's allotted 4 minutes. So, after all of the speakers are done, the discussion will turn to the board to discuss what it has heard over the last really 4 months discussing this matter, and decide what will be the next steps. This is a question of whether, ultimately the question for the board is whether to request that the village council authorize the board of directors and actually the Glendale Community Improvement Corporation as a whole to market a 10-acre property at the corner of Glendale and Walnut Avenues for potential development. And as people I think know, as I have said before, reminding people, this property is owned by the village, so only the council can can make a determination to market it. And that will be the council's responsibility if the board makes that request. And we will then have to just decide at the end what are the next steps in the process. Do we need additional information, additional hearing? And otherwise, do we wish to at least instruct the administrator and our solicitor to draft an ordinance or a resolution making the request to council? With that, I would ask, just as a preliminary step, I'm going to ask our administrator to walk us through briefly a presentation that was made at the last meeting, but maybe some of you were not at that meeting or on it, and so you can see that what we are, get some idea of what's being discussed.
All right. Thank you. Bob, are you getting feedback? 1 second, everyone. Is that a little bit better? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lofty. So as we said, we're going to go through the presentation. This was provided during the the April CIC meeting. So these drawings that are about to come up are conceptual drawings and preliminary revenue estimates based on those drawings. These conceptual property layout designs were designed to meet a housing need for first floor living quarters and develop active, accessible recreational space, two goals of the 10-acre property development. We'll also cover preliminary pricing information for this development and then economic impact of this development for village general and enterprise funds. So these sketches were prepared by a developer for the CIC for the consideration of density, design, and recreation elements based on the available acreage. So this is the first concept. It shows 17 lots. It's the second concept showing 19 lots.
David, the
Yes.
pictures aren't going up there.
Apologize for that. There we are. All right. First concept showing 17 lots with a buffer of green space property surrounding the entire development. Second concept, 19 lots with a large park recreation space in the front of the development, this being Glendale Avenue and this being Walnut Avenue. Then the third concept, 26 lots, showing a sort of combination of the two previous concepts. Park space, this one is rotated slightly. So this is Glendale Avenue along the left-hand side and then Walnut Avenue here. Give folks a better idea of how this is oriented. And then green space in the middle of the development as well. So we'll keep the screen up on these three concepts so that everyone can see them in their entirety in one slide.
Okay, thank you, David. I should say that these are very preliminary sketches of possible ways that the land could be developed if that were the decision of council ultimately. It does not mean that any one of them is going to be the final design. In fact, it would surprise me a lot if one was. So, I mean, one of the things we would be interested in hearing from people speaking today is kind of their, if they're open to any kind of development on the property, what kind of development would they like to see? And that we'd like to get that input. So with that, I'm going to ask that the first speaker, Cindy Taylor, come forward. Beg pardon? Okay. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Oldegas. I've been a resident of Glendale since 1957, and I reside over on Morris Avenue with my husband, Larry. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak. During the April meeting, I posed a few questions to the board with the expectation not to get an answer that day. So I'm hoping that you've had time to put your thoughts together and will be answering those questions for me. But before I get to those, I'd like to point out that throughout the history of village plans, and we have them dated back in the 30s, 40s, our leaders worked very hard to create what they referred to as protective barriers, such as Johnny's Park. Land was purchased for the sole purpose to grow trees and become a wooded barrier to protect the village. The trees not only provide us with sound barriers, windbreaks, the trees remove pollutants such as sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide through their leaves. It is my understanding the purpose of the GCIC is to further develop the village. The plans that are being put forth are in direct conflict with what the people who created our village had put forth. So it sounds to me, as a resident, that we're planning on tearing down what was put in place for us. My question to the board, what are your plans to replace the protection the trees currently provide to the residents who live in Glendale now versus the potential 20 families you want to bring on board?
I'll address just briefly. The CIC gets direction from council, and council has to make a decision about what its priorities are. If council wants the CIC to, if they make a decision that they want to develop or sell or otherwise develop the Greenbelt or any other space in Glendale, then it would come to the CIC to get developers to make bids and that kind of thing. But the first step is for village council to make a decision on their priorities, values about what village council wants to do about the green space. So that's where it starts. And I don't know that this body, the CIC, has the ability to make the decision about what we would replace the if the if Johnny Park was developed, what would we replace that with?
Well, first of all, thank you for acknowledging that it's Johnny's Park, because I'm proud to say I am Johnny's daughter. So this is a very passionate issue for me. So thank you very much for the politeness there. So it kind of this kind of stems back to my original thought is I'm begging the board to consider the needs of the 98% of the residents that currently are being impacted, so that you can bring 2% more people in houses. So I really hope that we'll be able to think about that. The other question I brought up in April was, what is the GCIC? As you said, your purpose is to develop the village. What are your plans to bring in new businesses to the village beyond hair salons? Because we have an overabundance of hair salons. I pointed that out. We have 8 places to get your hair groomed between the tracks and 747. We have empty buildings. Not only the former Meritage is empty, it has been since they moved to the square. But what plans are in place? What are we actively doing today? Because it seems like we've got a lot of attention focused on destroying the green belts, but what are we doing to develop and make a difference for the people that currently live here?
At this point, if you've been following our meetings, you're aware that we don't have any specific plans on the table to develop new business. Bear in mind, this is a new organization. We have been looking at marketing some properties that the village owns, and that has been our focus as of now. We're open to ideas as to how to attract new business. In fact, even since I've been mayor, the Village Square has gotten some new businesses into it, gotten the Meritage, gotten the beauty salon, or
another 2 more beauty salons in the square.
Anyway, the point is they are not empty offices. So we have done, some things have happened. Actually, I've handed out business cards to a number of places where I thought they would be interested in the old Meritage building, and so far, we haven't had any takers.
Well, I appreciate that, but, because we do need to develop our village going forward with new businesses. But the other part of my question is, are there plans to protect the residents that currently live in the area of Johnny's Park? Morse Avenue, one of the bridges, is being washed away. I have pictures I can share with you. The water overflows from the Glendale condominiums. It's flooding into the Creekwood area. Water is a high problem. When you look at Carruthers Pond and there's a lot of rain, there's a wash comes down from the Vineyard parking lot. We have a lot of water now. Your sketches, in the last meeting when you presented those, I believe Mr. Bryanstein brought it up. The park is really going to be a retention pond, so that's not going to be a park that you can go to, correct? And if this is developed, wouldn't that become a private area like Carruthers Pond? We used to be able to fish in Carruthers Pond, but once it was developed, it is now a private property, no fishing sign is up. So that's not something that a Glendale resident can enjoy. So if there's anything I'd like to see on these slides is making them, mention that park isn't really a park, it's going to be a waterway, as was stated in the meetings, because I do follow these meetings quite closely. But what are you going to do for us on Morse?
Was that a question?
What are you going to do for us on Morse? Our roads are falling apart. This development is going to further damage. The traffic is impossible. You've since 2000, over 57 buildings have been added to this corner of the village.
You have about a minute.
Okay, same thing I said last year, so that if you were following what I said last meeting, you would know
Right.
what I'm about to say. So that's what I have today.
Okay. We would, we of course will be required, any developer who develops that property would be required to present a plan for managing the stormwater runoff from it. And that would undoubtedly include a retention pond. And at the same time, this is really good input for this meeting right now, because you're saying we also would like to have a park that's part of that whatever development might
What I
come.
stated was I would rather you not develop it at all and put time and attention into Johnny's Park as it is today. Put some
I
picnic
am
tables
trying to answer
in
your
there.
question.
And I appreciate that, but I just want to make sure you understood my question correctly. Thank
Okay.
you.
But well, if I finish my answer, then maybe you'll know.
And you'll find out from my husband that that's a
Got it.
hard thing to do with me.
Okay. So anyway, we would certainly be very interested in putting, in addition to a pond there, a park that would be usable by the village. The good thing here is that since the village owns the property, we can be very directive to a developer as to what happens to it. And I would envision, and you've given us good input here about the need for a park up there. It's a fact that the east side of the village is somewhat lacking in parkland. And so this could be a start towards remedying that situation.
All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Next.
Is Beth Solibarger joining by Zoom? Bob, can you promote me to co-host? One second here is. Appreciate everyone's patience. Lumsden? And the panelists?
Is Beth there?
Beth is in the attendees list. I need to be promoted to co-host to
Okay.
promote her. Unless, Bob, you'd like to just allow Beth Solibarger to speak.
As I said in the beginning, we're new at this format, so bear with us.
All right, Beth is coming in.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I can't see myself, so I'm not sure. I will be very brief tonight because I have spoken previously, but I think that it would be a mistake. I think it would set a very bad precedent for the village to sell property that it acquired specifically for Greenbelt. And we need all the green space that we have presently. And I realize that council will make the decision about the sale, and I will save my, any further remarks for council in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Peter Stackpole.
Mr. President, members of the board, neighbors, I'm Pete Stackpole. I've been here for 6 years, so that makes me a newborn in terms of Glendale. Nevertheless, I was hearing about saving our green spaces and I was concerned, and I thought this is really an issue I wanted to learn more about. So I went ahead and learned more about it. And I think it's really great that we have people who care enough about the village to come forward and speak about these issues. I think I also want to thank all of you for spending your time. I know you're all volunteers doing this. When I looked at this, I started with a great concern, and then I understood that the proposal was for the single floor development of places basically for people who don't want to remain in a large house as they grow older. And I can tell you that my knees are already bad, unfortunately. And I know going up and down the stairs can be an issue. And I'm just here to say that I think it's worth consideration for the council to consider whether or not this is something that you want to do with this space. I would love to see some of these plans in more detail. I'd like to, I don't know if these are the right plans, but I do think that smart development is important to the village. I think that you have a lot of people who love this village, even some of those of us who have only been living here for 6 years, who would like to remain in the village. And I can tell you that if I have to stay in the village, when I'm 90 years old and having a hard time getting up the stairs, I would certainly much prefer to be in a place that has a first floor bedroom. I think that would be, an amenity that I think would be very important to me as I grow older and am retired. So for me, I don't have obviously we want green spaces. There's nobody who's going to get up here and say that, you should just get rid of them all. Of course, I'm sure everyone wants green spaces and the green belt, but I think it's also important to have places for people as they age where they can go and continue living in the village. So I just would say that if you are going to make this request for village council to consider it, I would like to see thoughtful proposals so that we're retaining as much of the green spaces as possible. But I think it's also a worthwhile thing for people to be able to age in place and maybe transition, when you have a young family in a large house into a smaller location. And that's one of the things that I noticed as I lived here is that, there's quite a few large homes, but, the first floor master is not something that's as prominent. So thank you. That's it.
Thank you. The next person is on Zoom, Mark Godby. Is he in the list, David?
It's coming up now.
Can you promote him?
Mark, are you there? I see him.
I should say this is a good dress rehearsal. I really want to do a hybrid meeting for the first council meeting in June, on June 7th. And so this is the dress rehearsal. So we're going to make all of our mistakes here and leave them all behind.
He's just muted. He's in, he's just muted.
So Mark Godby is muted. Mark, can you unmute yourself? Can you hear me? Wave your hand to David if you can hear me.
He's not on video.
Oh, okay. Shall we then jump to the next person and we will come back to Mr. Godby? Okay, next person on my list is Ralph Hoop. Ralph is here in person.
I'd like to speak to three topics. One is what I perceive as the need for lifestyle housing in Glendale. I'd like to speak as to how Glendale uses green space at the current time. And I'd also like to talk about things I hope the village does going forward with respect to this possibility on Johnny Park. My wife and I moved to the village almost 40 years ago, and we bought our house from an estate. We never knew the people who previously owned it. I think the family was named Whitney. And I understand Jim Whitney was a council person, was very active in the village. Heard there were some pretty good parties, okay. But I also heard after we moved in that they, both the husband and the wife fell ill in their 60s, were confined to a hospital bed, and actually put those hospital beds in the living room of our house for the final months or years of their life. I think you're probably not giving parties when you're that sick, so I think that's a good purpose. But my house was built in 1910, and there was no bathtub or shower on the first floor. So I don't know how they handled personal hygiene, whether they hobbled up the stairs or they took sponge baths. Now, when we've just had 600,000 people die horrible deaths in the last year, this is not exactly, the end of the world, but I don't think any of us would choose without being able to take a shower for the last year of your life, something like that. That's not very pleasant. So as we got older, we contemplated that when I retired about 20 years ago. And we looked around to see if there was a piece of property that we could buy and build a one-story house. We came close. We actually had a verbal agreement to do that, but it fell through. And we never came across a single-story house that we felt was attractive. So about 5 years ago, about 15 years ago, 5 years later, we actually got an architect and did a little bump out on the back of our house. You can't see it from the street, but it's a single level. It's about 400 square feet. We brought the washer and dryer up from the basement. We put a handicap shower in. You could take a wheelchair into the shower if you needed to, and there's space to put a bed. And we're fortunate we did it because my wife has been confined to that space for about the last 3 years. So we're very lucky. But as I look around the neighborhood, I'm one, as you all know, Tom Todd died about 3 or 4 months ago. So I'm one of 3 living mayors and the only one that's still living in a house. And I see, well, he was there. Where he's now behind me over here. Mayor Hubbard abandoned ship from his 2-story residence about 15 years ago, I think it was. And the last I know, they're living very happily in a single-story thing down in, I'll call it Brandywine. I guess it's, yeah. And
You have about a minute.
the mayor before Todd was Alec Brockmeyer, and about a year ago, he in fact also abandoned his 2-story house and moved down to a single-level condominium. About a year plus ago, we found our neighbors across the street who had lived there for 30 years, in fact said, we want the convenience of a single level, and they put a for sale sign and have moved down there. Very happy. Mary Stewart, that used to live at the end of our street, at the end of her life, in fact, she moved down to a single level condominium. The fellow was a partner that built the Glendale, I keep saying Glendale, Glendale condominiums, like 50 years ago, sold his 2-story house and moved in down there. So I think there is a distinct need for senior lifestyle housing, not new residents, but people that already live there. I think I'm about out of time. If there's any time we come back, because there's not enough people speaking positively, I'd like to speak to green space. But the point is, I do think there's a place for present residents that want to stay in the village.
Thank you, Mayor. Cindy, would you be ready to speak now? Great.
I didn't really realize it until I saw everybody sitting here that it's 7-1. So I'm glad, Joan, I'm glad you're on this committee. Okay, my first question is, why are we not calling it Johnny Park? Do you want me to ask all my questions, or do you want to answer after each one?
I can tell you why I choose not to call it Johnny Park, because
Okay.
it's never been deemed an official park within the village. The name, it was a nickname given to that particular piece of land because Ms. Aldegay's father, named Johnny, was in fact the person who was assigned to take care of it, to mow it and keep it in good shape. So people started calling it Johnny's Park. I distinguish that from, say, other parks, Carruthers Park, and Floral Park. In fact, very few of our parks are really named for people when it comes down to it. Floral Park, others, Summit Park, Washington Park. Washington was a person, but no, not a resident of Glendale. So that's my own thought.
I was just curious because in the village plan of 2000, it was called Johnny Park. Okay. I have watched so many areas of Glendale disappear, all the green space. I mean, I can read through all the subdivisions since I was a kid, and that was all private land. So really, there's nothing you can do about that. But these green spaces, for me, have always been sacred. That's what we were always told as kids, that these things would never be built upon. And I know times change, but I can tell you all of us that grew up here are just shocked that this is even being brought forth. I've had a lot of calls from people asking me whether they should sell their house. They're all upset about the green space being possibly developed. Now remind me what the reason is that we're wanting to develop this. Is it budget, or is it the need for homes?
For me, and I can't, look, I mean, this is a board. This is 7 individuals on the board of directors. I'm one. So if you're just putting the question to me, my interest in doing this is to provide housing for people in the village who find that they can't, the housing that they're in, their beloved old homes that have lots of stairs and lots of outdoor and indoor maintenance to them, just don't suit their needs anymore. And my observation has been that anytime a house that goes on the market that has the properties of a first floor master suite and other ways of maintaining the house more easily, those places are snapped up very quickly, often with multiple offers and bids over the asking price. So that is the reason I'm interested in it. I'm not doing it for the money here.
Okay, well.
There's about a minute remaining.
Okay, because instead of really looking into this so much, what I wish we would be doing was following ordinances and making sure things are being done properly. There's houses that are in disrepair, junk cars without wheels in front yards, streets that are embarrassing, Summit Park that has so many things that need to be done there. I think there's a lot of other issues we should be dealing with at this point. And if we don't have the amount of money that needed to take care of Glendale the way it should be, then something needs to be done about that too. But I just can't even believe the state of Glendale at this time. And I still love living here, but the visual appeal of it is slowly changing. And it's very sad to me. Okay, my time's up.
Hey, Don, can I say one thing?
Yes, Bob.
Cindy, I'm right with you, but I think what we all need to sit here and say, to have the village be what we need to be, at some point, there's going to be have to be some taxes. This is, to me, this is not enough money to fix what we need to do with Glendale. There's just so we're all sitting here, when it comes time to think about higher taxes, we really need to do it. I mean,
That's a good point, Bob. Okay. All right. Next person on my list is David Schmidt. He is on Zoom.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Excellent. So for those of you that know or remember me, hi, I'm Dave Schmidt. For those of you that don't, I'm a former Glendalian. My wife, Rachel, and I moved to the village in 1999 and spent 19 wonderful years there. We were lured by the charm of the village and the historic old homes, one of which we did manage to acquire and spent time lovingly restoring. But in living there, what we found is, and you can see it in this meeting tonight, the passion of the people for the village. The villagers here love the village. And it's been a characteristic that we saw throughout the time that we lived here and the many friends that we made over that time. But like has been mentioned before, we reached a point in our life where we needed to find a different kind of home, not a 3-story vertical home with 2 acres of yard to maintain, but rather something smaller, a 1-story living plan, 1st floor master, 1st floor laundry room, smaller yard to maintain. And honestly, we looked and Glendale would have been our first choice. However, we could not find the house that we were looking for. So we've moved a short distance away, 30 miles or so. We still get back and forth, and I do follow what's going on in the village. Honestly, I can't speak to the concerns or what people may think about whether Johnny Park might be a good thing to have or not. But what I would observe is if it is in the best interest, if you believe as a commission or moreover as a council, that it's in the best interest of the village to retain people who love the village, care for the village, and want to continue to be part of it, I believe you're going to need to find a way to provide housing that allows them to age in the village without having to continue to be in big old houses. My observation. Thanks.
Thank you. Next on my list is Kit Morrison. Kit is on Zoom. David?
Coming in. Kit, if you can hear us, you'll need
Hi,
to.
this is Kit Morrison.
Hello, Kit. We can hear
You
you.
requested me to unmute.
Yes. We've reached the point in the public comment where it's your turn to speak.
I don't know if you're asking me to speak or if David was passing it over. We actually bought the Schmidt's house. We love it. We love Glendale. I think we are interested in.
We can't hear you.
All right. Well, thank you for. Can you?
We're losing you.
We actually bought the Schmidt's house. We love it here. We love Glendale. I would have to say that right now we're leaning in sympathy of those who want to retain the green spaces. We're very concerned about the loss of green spaces. And really would like to know more about how it got to this point as far as the council's right to make the decision to sell? I mean, is that in the bylaws that the council has that power to make that decision without votes from those here in the village?
We can't hear you.
And I'm not hearing you at this point. Are you hearing
Okay.
me?
Can you hear me now? Quite a phrase. Okay, David, make sure you add some time to Kit's 4 minutes because we're just losing her. Kit, are you still trying to talk to us? Maybe we should go.
I was. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yes.
Okay, I'm not sure where I cut off, but I was saying we appreciated the chance to follow David Schmidt because we're the ones who bought his house and we love it here. We love Glendale. I was saying I think our sympathy lies now with those who are very interested and concerned about saving the green space here. And being new to the village, we're not totally familiar with the council's bylaws, et cetera, but we're wondering about how it got to this point where the council has the power of the right to sell the property without a vote from the villagers. Is that what is happening?
Okay, if that was your question is, how does council have the legal power to sell village property without a vote of the residents? The answer is it does. It's part of our part of the authority of council under the Ohio Code.
Okay, well, thank you for clarifying that. And again, I think our primary concern at this point is trying to protect the green space, making that a priority. And we also do understand your concern for housing needed in the area. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next on my list is Ron Vischer.
Thank you. I've been a resident of Glendale since 1979, so I guess that's 42 years.
Ron, you're kind of tall from the microphone there. Can you push it up a little bit?
Is that a little bit better?
That's much
can you
better.
hear me now? What I like about these drawings is that they don't really require Johnny's Park to implement. They enable putting high density housing in any location. There's a few acres. And that could be done. What's wrong about the proposal in Johnny's Park is that Johnny's Park was planned by the village in 1944. They decided to buy a green belt, urban forest they called it, and they paid $1,000 an acre of village tax money in order to create this. They revisited that in the plan of 2000. And in the plan of 2000, they asked the question, do we need to maintain the same amount of green space, less green space, or more green space? And they concluded, under the financial guidance of the National Park Service, that we needed more green space. Unfortunately, we haven't bought as much green space as I wish we would have. There are many financial needs that the village has. One thing that's occurred is this $1,000 acre, an acre of green space that is in Johnny's Park. If you look at what a half acre, the most recent sale of a half acre in the village of Glendale, it sold for $113,000. Well, that's a compounding annual growth rate of approximately 7.5%, which is much greater than we're able to achieve with the investments that we currently have in bonds. I think the finance meeting, it said it was 1.8%. So if the village is interested in building its portfolio of capital assets, it would buy more green space rather than sell what we have. And it certainly wouldn't choose to sell what we have because it is a much better investment than we otherwise qualify for. The additional point is that the thing that we risk most in selling Johnny's Park is that we won't be following the village plan of 1944 or the village plan of 2000. And in that the village plan of 2000 was financed by the National Park Service, we risk losing the designation of being a planned community. And that has profound implications to everybody in the village. The first thing that would happen is the state would take Sharon Road and say it needs to be a 4-lane highway. It would take Congress and say it needs to be a 4-lane highway. I lived in the village in which the state has requested that those roads be 4 lanes wide. And if you look at where those roads come from, at the end of the boundaries of Glendale, they are 4 lanes wide.
You have about a minute.
So we would change the entire character of the village by risking its National Historic District classification because we want to put in housing that could go in many, many, many other locations. So I understand the desire for patio homes. I think patio homes can be built elsewhere. If someone would spend time and read this, it talks about how homes for people that want to downsize can be created on village land that's privately owned. And I've had neighbors that have split their lots and created patio homes and sold them off separately. So it's something that can be done. It's something that's recommended in the plan. And I really think that the board ought to look at the plan before they do something that would enable the council to risk our historic district designation. Thank you.
Thank you. There was no question there, but I'm just going to say that certainly the preservation of the village's historic designation is of utmost importance to the village council. I can assure you of that. And before, we would not do anything that we came to the conclusion would compromise that designation. Yes, Ron. The decision is probably ultimately the village council because the GCIC is more of a pro-development group.
I think the GCIC could do that research regarding impact on national historic status. And it would make sense for that to happen.
Okay.
Possibly.
Okay, thank you.
Don, I've got a point to make. So I know we referred to village plans and so forth. So the first one was in 1940. The second one was in 2000. I mean, that's 21 years ago. Some of the elements are still valid, personally, for me. Others, I think, need to be revisited because 21 years is a long time. Things evolve, things change. We need to come to a realization that as society moves on, you need to adapt to the new needs of society. And the village plan in 2000, I think needs probably some careful reworking based on where society is today and what the needs of society are today. I mean, if you look at the 1940 plan, you know, we were supposed to have an airport. Well, I don't see the airport anymore. We had a designated Negro part of town. I mean, can you believe that? I mean, that's what the 1940 plan called for. So as we move through life, we need to evaluate what are the needs of society today versus what they were back then. And for good reasons, I think there's been changes, and I think for the best. I think there's a lot of passion and emotion on any of these issues. I mean, I, for one, am very passionate about changes that take place in my life. When Christ decided to add an addition in front of my house, I wasn't opposed to the addition. When I looked at the addition and I said, well, this looks more like something that would be close to a motel versus in historic Glendale, I was opposed to the look of it. But Glendale, the Planning Commission and council approved that. And, you know, it is what it is. Life moves on and we need to address the needs of the current community, the current resident. And when I hear people say, well, the old people should move out of Glendale if they can't, you know, walk up and down the stairs anymore, that's kind of sad. I mean, most of those people probably spend most of their life in Glendale, and they need to have a place where they can actually have an opportunity to spend the rest of their lives. So just my point.
Just to follow up on what Mike has said and also what Ron, you were talking about as well. I did read the village plan, and you know, it was the 2000 plan. It was simple. I Googled Glendale Village Plan and it came right up. So it was easy to find. And, you know, it was, this commission was in 2000. I think the approval or the acceptance of the plan was accepted by council a couple years later, maybe 2002, but it was accepted by council at that time. And I understand that we have to move on. I understand that there's you know, it's a 20-year-old plan, which in the life of our community is really not that old at all. But it's pretty clear when you read this that there's a very strong feeling about keeping the green space. It's referenced over and over again. And yeah, could this plan use an update? Sure, but I think it would be the role of council to commission another group to put together another village plan, another master plan, if that's says from 44. So I think I agree that there needs to be an update, but only if the council, village council decides to do that and to honor the work that people did in 2000 as to the green space and the priority for preserving green space. So I agree with what you're saying.
And if I may add, the plan also called, the 2000 plan called for new developments to fund our village budget. Identifying sources for future capital expenditures appear to be the greatest challenge for the village. That was the concluding element of the village plan in 2000.
Okay, thank you. I think we're going to move on from this, but let me just say a couple of people are standing in the back there. We do have some extra chairs in the storage room behind former Mayor Hubbard. So if you need a chair, you can get one over there. One more comment, Ron. Ron, maybe you better go up to the microphone so that everybody can know what you're saying.
I'm sorry, the comment was made that people have read the plan and maybe it's time to look at specifics of the plan and update it. And I think that the one point is that Johnny's Park was purchased based on a recommendation for that specific space in 1944. It has been something that has been part of the plan of the village for 80 years, and that when we take the step to say specifically this need of these drawings, this land needs to be at this specific space that the village has preserved on a plan for 80 years, we are making a step that's one step farther than saying we need to have homes that offer village residents the opportunity to live in a single family dwelling, a single level dwelling. So there are two aspects to what's coming in front of us.
Thank you. Okay, next is Lee Thomas.
Good evening. My name is Lee Thomas, and I am a relatively short-lived resident here in Glendale. We've been here almost 7 years. I had 3 points I'd like to make. One of them is a follow-up to the councilwoman's comments about this would be a village council decision. The council would be the one to actually make the decision about whether or not we could go against the village plan of 2020 and sell off the property that we call Johnny's Park. My question, I had asked the village council that question previously and didn't get an answer. So I'm going to rephrase it for this group and ask, what direction have you received from village council as far as pursuing the development and sale of that piece of property? And have they specifically given you guidance to go against what is in the village plan of 2020 and look at selling off that property? So that's one question that I have. The second question is, I understand that another former mayor, Alex Brockmeyer, had suggested that before we move forward with this plan, that there's some type of market analysis, because we need to understand if this plan is financially viable. If there's monies that the village is wanting to cover a shortage, is the plan that we have in place viable, or the plan that you're discussing viable in order to cover any shortfall? So I'd like to see or ask if any type of market analysis has been conducted. The last thing I'd like to address is my understanding of the GCIC is economic development for the village. And I was a little disappointed to see the agenda, and I appreciate the mayor's response to someone else asking a similar question about why Johnny's Park is the only thing on the agenda. It seems that we're being very short-sighted about economic development in the village. So back to my question number one, has the village council given you guys direction and asked you specifically to look at selling off the green spaces?
No, it is not. It's not given the, really the plan, the goal, the instruction from council when the GCIC was formed was to do whatever is allowed under the Ohio Code, which is what ultimately governs us, but recognizing that anything we do is merely a recommendation to council that something be done. So there was no need for specific guidance from council, because council knew that at the end of the day, they had the authority to make the final decision.
It raises the question to me is, how do we even find ourselves in this position? How do we find ourselves with a committee such as yourself looking at selling off green spaces that goes against the plan of 2020 without council guiding you to do so? It's just perplexing.
Can I respond, or you gonna go ahead? Do you want to respond?
Go ahead.
You know, I've said in past meetings, I think this is premature, and that's my position. I know other people here feel differently, but until we get direction from council about what their priorities are, what their standards are for what property, village property needs to be or should be sold, there's a lot of questions, and I do think this is premature, but I have said that before, so.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, next, David, is there a chance of trying to get Mr. Godby on the line? Let's give it another try.
We also have Joe Hubbard is not on the list.
Oh,
he is to speak.
All right.
Once I find my mouse cursor, I try Mr. Godby again. Mark, are you there?
He's not on mute, or?
No, he's unmuted.
He is unmuted.
He's unmuted.
Okay. Okay. Nope. All right. We will continue then. Next on my list is Angie Larimer. Angie? Now you got to bring it down. It was set for Mr. Vischer there.
Okay. Following up on Joan's comments, I have a couple of points to make. I don't understand why we aren't better organized. Why are we talking about this development? We all know that the village needs money. I heard someone say a couple of weeks ago about our finances. We're fine for this year. We'll make it through this year, but next year is pretty iffy. If it's that bad, why are we talking about this nickel dime development stuff? Sure, go after Landmark. That makes sense. But I think we really need a tax levy. I don't know why we're skirting that issue. We really need it. I also want to speak to communication in the village. Why are we here? No one really knows what's going on. I mean, the last meeting I attended, we ended up talking about the Landmark property. And I thought, well, that's a good way to go. If you want to develop, go for it. It's still not the money we need, but it's sure, let's start there. And now we have this meeting that's only about Johnny's Park. It doesn't make sense. This is crazy town. We need to have a plan. And if we can't follow the 2020 plan, we need to make another plan. Maybe it's time. Mike suggested that. But I don't think the way to do this is to just go against the 2000 plan, just walk all over it and forget it. We can't do that. That's not the way government is supposed to be run. I also want to speak to the water issues. I have been a resident of Creekwood, and I'm now a resident of Brandywine. And I want to tell you, there's water issues big time in both of those developments. We can't stand any more development in that neighborhood. It's just wrong. You haven't seemed to solve the problem that was created by Bethany. So what are you going to do with another big water problem? That's all I have.
Okay. Next, Karen Sinkfield.
Just joining by Zoom.
Okay.
It's coming in now.
Karen, are you there?
Hello, I did not have questions for this meeting. We just want to be invited via Zoom.
I'm sorry, I'm correctly hearing that you don't have any comments or questions?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next on Zoom, Tom Euclid.
Good afternoon.
Hello, Tom.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Perfect. Good afternoon. Now it's good evening. I just first want to start out by thanking the board for all the work that's being done right now. My wife has lived in Glendale for 40 years. I've been here about 36. So we too obviously love this village. But I'll have to admit that in all these years, we've never once had a picnic in the green space. We've never taken a hike in the green space. Actually, never knew you could even do that. But obviously, people are concerned that we're not doing those kind of things. So I do support the development in the area in question. But I do think that we can do both. I think we can do both goals of maintaining the green space as well as developing the residential property. I think that if a decision is made to develop the space, we could specify that any development has to include a certain amount of whatever public space, as well as to maintain any barriers that we would need that we currently get from the green space. So I think as part of the specifications, that's what we could dictate to any potential developer. Now, the only comment that I have about the type of development I'd like to see, and I do agree it's these patio homes that people have talked about. I know the initial developer that has been contacted, to me, those costs seemed a little high, and maybe that's just the real world because I haven't been house hunting for a long time. But I was hoping we could find something a little lower price that, you know, people could afford. And then my last comment, I just want to address, I'd like to build on something that Ron Vischer said, and it's actually been said by a couple people now. I still think there's something we've got to do with that landmark property. I know we totally scared off Dries with that property, but when you read the papers and you see how housing is moving so fast everywhere, you would think that that land has to be even more desirable than ever to a developer. So, you know, at worst case, I'd sure like to get us in there to see if there's anyone who would please come back and reconsider that property. So I support the development, but I think you can do both. I think you can have a combination of green space and development. So those are my comments, and I appreciate the work that this board is doing. Thanks again.
Thank you, Tom. Next, Kevin Parrish.
I'm very happy as a third generation Glendalian to see so many residents present and concerned about the future of this community. My family has had residency here for 100 years. And in all that time, we've seen very little change in the designated Black areas. Concerning the GCIC, I remember when they talked about the development of the landmark property, and the discussion was that council would be the overseers of what was going to happen. When that fell in the bucket, now they appoint themselves as the Glendale Community Improvement Council. So by show of hands, how many of you are on council?
One council.
So that means that anything that you come up with, any ideas you come up with would basically be in your favor. I don't disapprove of Glendale doing something other than the mismanagement of finances like this state fund returned to us some years ago when it went down to Cincinnati. But I do think that we have more pressing issues, especially the sanitary sewer system and water problems that we have that affects all residents in Glendale. The lack of transparency makes us skeptical to trust you guys. Where's the annual budget report? Well, you don't report to us, you work for us. And yet you have forgot your obligations to this community. It's disturbing to me that you can so easily take credit for this historic community, but yet you don't recognize what its history was built on. It was the first planned community in the United States, planned by abolitionists and great local white heroes that showed courage in helping provide justice for people like me. You raise up Morgan, and yet when Morgan and 2,000 soldiers came here, 2,000 soldiers on a 1.7 square mile area, they found not one slave because of the intricate system of tunnels and abolition correlation that was here. This community was a major conductor in the Underground Railroad. I imagine that's why the Liza House was moved from the spot it was to out in Walnut Hills. We cannot destroy history if we want to know where our future is going.
You have about a minute.
We keep manipulating things here to show a better light in where we are. To get answers, you have to address the truth And with the lack of transparency, there's criminology. The criminal element is here strongly in your manipulation of the residents, and I'm sick of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on my list is Jody Skowronek.
I don't see Jody.
I don't see her in the room. Is she on Zoom? Okay. So that brings us to Mr. Hubbard, who is here.
I forgot what I want to say right now. Good thing you wrote it down. My name's Joe Hubbard, and I'm a lot of the people here. We've been friends for many years. I spent the day today walking around so-called Johnny Park. And in fact, that's the second
Joe, could you
time-
talk a little closer to the microphone, please?
That's the second time that I've walked around that park. I find it very interesting to go back there. And also school children go back there from the grade school. I see them going in groups with their teachers back there to learn a little bit about the forest. And, but anyway, a couple weeks ago, Don Lofty asked me, he says, well, what do you think about doing something there and with some houses? And I said, only if we have a small number. He said, what's a small number? And I said, because it's an even number, 10. I mean, that's about all the thought that I put into it. But when I went out today and I paced different areas to see how much, where could we put things? I had about, 10 was coming out, 10 or 11, something like that was coming out. The big problem was a lot of the protection there is a lot of trees and bushes and everything. You can't take that out because that's going to destroy the neighbors. And the second thing is that there's some big houses back there and you don't want to build right up to a big house. And people paid a lot of money for those houses. And I think we've got to be very careful about what we do. And then the fact that I looked at all three of the plans and they don't look like we're being very careful to the people who live there now. So a small number of houses, I say, great, go for it. But no, for the plans that I saw. And then I say this with a little bit of misgivings because are we opening the gate to the green belt? That's all owned by Glendale. And, please, we don't want to start the rush to do that type of thing. And so I'm very concerned about that future somebody trying to say, this came up a few years ago, by the way, and somebody wanted to put condominiums up there and the village was looking at it but what saved us from having something go forward was the fact that that's not even in Glendale. They're in Woodlawn. And so we're using the Woodlawn ordinances and everything to do it. And it's not really helping the residents other than maybe have a smaller place. And but anyway, I'm concerned about the thrust of what we would be doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Other than Mr. Godby and Ms. Skowronek, that is everyone on the list. And what's that?
Is it possible to be added to the list?
Is there any objection? Is there any objection from the board? We can add to the list.
Thank you.
Okay, you may come forward.
My name is Angela Havens, and I actually don't even live in Glendale. However, my family has been here for several years. As a matter of fact, Johnny Carroll is my grandfather. That park was maintained by a man with very high integrity. He loved this community as much as he did his family. He did not care at any point in his life what color you were, what gender you were. All he cared about was whether or not people did the right thing. Building on that park, Johnny's Park, is not the right thing for this community. Maintaining that, cleaning it up, going in with a bush hog and taking down all of the overgrowth, turning it into something that this community can actually use is the right thing to do. You can have kids playing there. You can build play sets, picnic areas. There's so much land there that you could do so much for this community and be able to maintain the areas that we have that have water issues. And it's not just Johnny's Park. Any green space in this community should be saved. When you talk about small villages like Glendale, you talk about the historical value. The Underground Railroad, which was mentioned, saved millions of lives because of the people that started this village. People who wanted to continue to make it small and intimate. And one of the things that you should consider is maintaining the legacy of people who made this village great. My grandfather worked for 19 years for this village, and the only reason that he stopped is because he got lung cancer and died within weeks of his diagnosis. Otherwise, he would have been working for this village a lot longer. That's the kind of legacy that you guys should want to try and maintain. You should want to highlight the people who love this community more than anything else. You should want younger generations to know the kind of people who made this community great. So build up that green space as a place for families to go and enjoy. Put up a plaque and actually recognize it, as they did years ago, as Johnny's Park. It was posted in the papers. The village said, this is Johnny's Park, because he loved the community and made it into what it was back then. A gorgeous green space. Put up a plaque and let people know what these people did. Other places around Glendale, people did just the same kind of stuff. Recognize the legacy that is in this village. Don't destroy it by putting up houses that, quite frankly, most retirees I know could never afford. At some point in my life, I have every intention of moving into Glendale and becoming a permanent resident. Despite the fact that I've already felt like I was a resident from growing up in my grandparents' house. Summit Park, Washington Park, Johnny's Park, you guys should be saving these things. Worry about improving the properties around it. Take care of the water, take care of the sewage. Don't destroy the beautiful property that you have. Thank you.
Could I just ask you to spell your name, please? Could you come back? I didn't get your name.
Havens, Havens.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak who hasn't spoken already? Go ahead.
I wasn't planning on speaking publicly tonight. I've lived in Glendale for 3 months.
Could you introduce yourself?
Yeah,
please?
my name is Joe Castruzzi.
And you spell your name, please?
Castrucci. And I guess from my point of view, I'm not seeing much of a vision or hearing any kind of creative solutions, honestly, from either side. I'm pro green space, big time, but I don't think I've heard an argument for it that would be able to convince you guys. And the argument on the other side's even worse. I don't know what the identity of Glendale is or what it is going forward. I could tell you the identity of Mount Lookout. I could tell you the identity of all these places. There's only two things I can think of: historic homes and green space. So I think, I just want to know what the overall vision is, and what does this even play into the vision for the community? Because I think you really need to bring in the next generation, and this isn't going to do it. But I'll say one thing I don't know where Johnny's Park is. I just learned about it. I'm going to go there after this. Are there trails there? Is there anywhere in Glendale to walk off the sidewalk?
Is that a question?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay, is there a place to park where you're not on people's property? Because Mount Lookout, you have Alt Park. Clifton, you have Burnett Woods. You can every one of these communities.
We have Summit Park and Washington Park.
Are they paved?
Parts of them are, but Washington Park has a walking trail around kind of the perimeter.
I'm definitely going to go there. I mean, I love hiking. That's what I like to do with my kids and family. So it's
Quite honestly, we look at Glendale as a park.
I do
It's a
too.
beautiful place to walk through no matter where you are.
I totally agree. It's amazing, but it is nice to get into the woods and for a kid to get into the woods. So if there's an opportunity to build that, I think you're going to get the school district has a bad reputation. The diversity issue is apparent. So it's like, I think you need to start thinking about way down the road how you're going to brand yourselves. For instance, I have a business. We do $3.5 million a year in sales. I have a building in Woodlawn, and I'm not throwing anyone under the bus, but I emailed the contact for business development in Glendale, and I was given the contact for the owner of a cafe. And I wouldn't be willing to move a retail showroom for my business into downtown Glendale. There's a sign that says upscale retail, but anyone that pulls off this road to visit upscale retail is going to be very disappointed. And if they decide they want a latte, there's not an espresso machine down there. I'm saying these are the things that people want. So you're running into a big age issue with bringing the next generation in, and you're getting more and more cut in by Tri-County, a place that has zero demand. So where are you going to go? If people want to do something, they're going to go to Oakley, downtown, Northside. And I'm the type of person who probably should live in Northside. And we've lived in Northside, but we chose here because it was beautiful.
You have about 30 seconds.
So, hearing that part of it's going to get destroyed for a temporary fix is kind of disappointing. So that's it. Oh, also retrofitting old houses into multi-level condos at least plays into the historic nature of the community and evolves, But I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Just anybody else who hasn't spoken? Come on.
Rebecca Isaacs, IS, AACS. Grew up in Glendale, born in Glendale. Went to New York for college, spent decades there, came back home. So the Greenbelt, Johnny's Park, Summit Park, Washington Park, all of it is in my heart. I came home. My question with this, because I'm hearing, and it's a logical thing to say, let the people gracefully age from Glendale. Okay, part of that's called downsizing, guys, which is a natural thing that people do everywhere. You buy the big house, you raise the family, you downsize. If this gets sold to a developer, what is to assure us that those units get sold to residents of Glendale? Are you able to dictate that as part of the sale? That these are marketed only to current residents of Glendale? Because that seems to be, other than a revenue issue, which I think we can all be very sensitive to, but residents of Glendale only? Is that what you're assuring this community of? Because that seems to be the sales pitch. That's my question.
Okay.
All right. Good question.
Anyone else?
Well, the short answer to the question is there's been no assurance that they would only be sold to Glendale residents. There has just been a need identified from people in Glendale, and no one's gone far enough down the road with any developer to ask that question yet.
Is there anybody in this room who has knowledge to be able to say that that even would be legal,
Okay.
right? So if they were to just drive it, has to be residents, can a developer even be held to that standard legally?
I don't think you can, but
I don't think we would. I mean, quite frankly, I would oppose that kind of a restriction. We have identified a need for people who love Glendale to be able to stay here, and that's what we're trying to allow them the possibility. Any further, anything else from someone? Jody Skoranek.
came in person.
Okay, how does this work? Is it working? You know, I'm of two minds with this. Being a 40 years long gardener and being part of the park board, but also walking through Carruthers Pond development. I think that place is great. I think they've done a beautiful job retaining the greenness. And if we could do that same kind of thing, and also though, I think that we need to, well, there, you've got that was my thing, to take part of the area and make a park out of it. And then the other part, the housing. So I guess I'm just here to say that I approve of those plans. That's all.
Thank you.
Okay. Don, can I do a little housekeeping stuff?
Sure.
Okay. So regarding this being a monetary issue and whether or not the village is in good financial order for the next couple of years and transparency. And the finances have been mentioned a couple of times. So just to stick with that for a moment, there has been a lot of changes within the village and the village staff. Some were not anticipated, like the chief retiring. But there has been a lot of turnover. We, as a finance committee, we try to project out 5 years, which is kind of crazy. But that's what you do. And we've even on some occasions looked out 10 years, which is a little more risky. But you try to do that to put yourself in the best position you can. In the planning, you learn things and it helps you be prepared for the future. It's not like we can actually project it, but we try to do our best to anticipate what could be coming. So regarding where the village is for the next couple of years, this particular year, we will run a surplus. As of budget season last November, we didn't think we would. We thought we'd be at a deficit position. We will have a surplus this year for many, many reasons that I won't go into. But again, we planned for a deficit. Some things fell in a positive fashion for our financials, and we will have a surplus. In 2022, it is highly likely that we will be in the break-even range. And possibly, if we can manage some things a little bit better, there might be a surplus in 2022. We have to look at that a little more closely, and we can't say for sure at this moment, but we do know that we'll be in a break-even range. As we go further than that, it's a little hard to tell. It could stay at a break-even level, depending on how tightly we can control certain expenses, but we are likely to see a slight deficit in 2023 because of inflationary pressures. It's just, you have to count on 2 to 3% inflation for things that you buy, for salaries that you have to pay. And so that's the time, I think, in 2023 where we're deficit position, possibly break even, but likely deficit position. Now, there is time to put a levy on the ballot between now and 2022. There is time to do that. Before we would jump and do it this November, I think it's wise for us to see where this year is going to land. The end of this year, go ahead and do our budget planning, and then determine if in 2022 we'll need to put a tax levy on the ballot. I hate to raise taxes or even talk about raising taxes unless the village actually needs the money. So that's one piece. Okay, so for that's the levy. And then I have one other major thing to talk about, capital expenditures. But Cindy, please go ahead. Okay, capital expenditures, a nice segue. Here we go. All right. Consider where we are now with the village, the things that need to be fixed up. And, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands and tell us what else we need. The roads need to be fixed up. The water infrastructure needs to be fixed, and we're working on it. That's a long-range plan that has been in process now for at least 3 years. And we need better amenities in the parks. And we're working on that as well. So start with parks, that's the easy one. Washington Park, playground equipment was upgraded last year or the year before. What's the one that's going to get the major redevelopment? Cleveland. Cleveland's going to get a major redevelopment this summer. And then in 2022, we plan to do new playground equipment for Summit Park. And those are things that need to get done. Should it happen all in 1 year? Well, I hate to go back to the past, but when the financial crisis hit, we cut everything to the bone, and it was really hard to do. But what that built into the minds of council was, let's not spend all the money at once. Let's get things back on a rotation so that Washington Park the playground equipment's been fixed, Cleveland Park this year, Summit Park next year, and then back to Washington Park. What can we do there? Invest money continually in each park, kind of on a rotation. Same with buildings. Buildings need to be worked on. So last year, there was a lot of tuck pointing done here and the police station. Also, also the police station need the handicap accessibility. That was done 2 or 3 years ago, am I right? 4 years ago. Okay. So these things have all been slowly worked on. And now this year, what's going to happen with buildings is paint. So tuck pointing followed by paint. And then the year after, the garage at the police station needs a new roof. So these things are ongoing. Plus, there's money in the budget for Tom to take care of getting the bats out of here because they always come back, unless we want to take the slate roof off, which we don't want to do. So that's going on. Water infrastructure. So over the past 3 years, we've done better valving connection up by the water tower for when, if we had a major problem and had to turn on Greater Cincinnati, we can do that now and do it in a manner that will get proper water flow throughout the village. So that was done probably 5 years ago if the police station was 4. Anyway, so water main, Sharon Road from Congress to Route 4, now water main from Congress all the way down to Chester, now repave Sharon Road. And those things are all going in a sequence. As far as the other water infrastructure around the interior parts, not the major lines going through, but the interior parts. So the idea there is to do, is it called the?
You want me to brief on that?
Well, if you want to brief on it, it's CMON. Okay. So with that, that's an engineering study to see where all the plumbing is, and then sophisticated equipment that is available to us through the Ohio Regulatory Authority.
So the village is using the CMOM process. The first step is underground detection of our water, sewer, and stormwater utilities.
Right.
Now, we're partnering with the Rural Water Authority, which is a no-cost option with our utility department to identify leaks in our water mains and the interior mains, especially the older mains in the historic district. Those are about as old as the Sharon Road main that was just abandoned and replaced. So the interior mains are the next focus. We're going to be partnering with the Rural Water Authority to identify those leaks and then repair those mains as we identify those needs.
Right. So that gets done, and then following in sequence after that, repairs to the interior roads and resurfacing. So two streets that I know for sure are next up are Woodbine and Fountain, but we know that there is water infrastructure under those roads. In June, July, you'll see crews marking where the plumbing is, and then you'll see crews coming through with the equipment that can determine where there are problems within that water infrastructure. And then those areas will be taken care of, and once they are, then the roads can be resurfaced. Now, it's likely the road resurfacing will fall into 2022 because we won't be able to catch up to it. But all of these things are moving forward. Some of them are a little harder to see, and funding is available for all of it. So we're just going to proceed through.
Excuse me, Mr. Parrish had a question there.
Okay, I'm sorry. I wanted to finish the thought. I wanted to finish the thought, but those are things that are ongoing right now. And as far as the village finances for the general fund, not capital expenditures, but for the general fund, we're in good order for 2 years. So anyway, okay, so Mr. Parrish, I'm sorry. I wasn't ignoring you.
Could you step forward to the microphone, Mr. Parrish, just so everyone can hear you?
I'm curious as to, with our sanitary sewer situations. I know you guys have been working on the phase 1 sanitary sewer project for some time. Did we complete the phase 1? And if so, when was the completion date? Secondly, when are we going to get the annual report so that we as residents would be knowledgeable about some of the things you're talking about? These are the things with a lack of transparency. With the CMOM issue, which was the plan that has the mayor's signature, Wally and Steve Cantor's signatures on as trying to develop a sensible solution for our problems here. I noticed that on the original document that was posted in the Ohio EPA, that the figure for the loan was 62.5, but yet when David addressed the issue at a meeting, it went to 90,000. I didn't see those modifications in the documentation that I requested. And I was just wondering, where did the other 27.5 come from?
When was that request made?
Recently, I got email and I was perplexed by the one-page document for each month, January, February, March, and April, that you guys sent back to them, to Frank and another guy at the Ohio EPA.
So the CMOM loan application, which is a 0% 5-year loan, was applied for just shy, I believe the exact number was 89.6. And that covers the first stage of the CMOM process, which is the planning stage. And that is the GIS locating and engineering work to develop the next step, which is the design phase for any projects that are identified to remedy what's known as inflow and infiltration, which is stormwater entering our sewer system. So when those are addressed in the planning stages, we move to the design and then to the construction phases. So that $89,000 loan was for that first part. That's a 0% loan over 5 years that's paid for out of revenues from water and sewer bills.
Well, the August 18 document and letter that you sent addressing the issue of the notice of violation that we had, that document said 62.5 and the award date was supposed to be in January. In January, I addressed that issue at council and you guys said that it was going to be in February. So, and asking for any modifications to see if the numbers change because the 110,000 on the other part of the loan did not change. And then I called Steve Cantor, but when he heard my name, he didn't return my call, even though he's in environmental engineer services that we're using.
Okay, we are,
But I just want
okay.
So wait, there's one more here, Don, and then I want to tie this up. So
Yeah,
Donna,
we're
please
we're
go
off the
ahead.
agenda
Okay,
now pretty far.
Well,
so-
I'm trying to bring us back.
Okay,
All right.
good.
I was going to say, all this discussion is great, but you're way off topic. We're here for the parks. So if you could contain it to that, that would be helpful. I think this young man that came up and spoke, and I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, made a very good point. I am totally against developing these green spaces. If you start to destroy the character of this town, you will eliminate the likelihood that young people want to move in here. And that's how we're going to grow this community. I'm sorry, some of these older people that have the big houses, that's always been the case. We can't provide for everyone. And like you said, there's no guarantee that they'll even go to Glendale people. So the whole thought of that is kind of crazy. But, you know, to destroy the green spaces, you're going to eliminate these people who want to come here, and this whole place is just going to die out. So anyway.
Could you?
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Ms. Oldiges, did you have a question?
Before we proceed, ma'am, could you please provide your name and spelling for the record? Thank you.
Donna Wesselman.
Thank you, Donna.
Yeah, I'll be really quick. This all kind of circles back to my first statement when I was up here before. I understand and respect the fact that at GCIC, your purpose is to gather information, development, and present it to council. After hearing Mr. Bessel talk about all the things that we need to have done, the roads, the water, and things like that, and in support with what Mr. Parrish was saying, why don't we just table this whole thing about developing this neighborhood, address the things that need to be addressed? The only concern I heard expressed by Mr. Bogran back at the March meeting was that it costs money to mow the grass. Well, mow the grass once, put in a picnic table, rent the area out to families. After a few visits, we'll be able to pay to cut the grass ourselves. So again, I'm asking you, as a resident, please just drop this nonsense about developing that area, fix what needs to be fixed. And in the move ahead, like Mr. Bogran mentioned, 15 years from now, we still need something. We have nice roads to drive on. We have a community we can welcome people in to have coffee and visit our high-end shops. Then maybe we can talk about development. But that's my plea, just drop it.
Yeah, I think you make an excellent point. I mean, as Don mentioned that one of the drivers is to have housing for people that want to stay in Glendale and so forth. I think there's two sides to this. One is additional homes is really the only way that Glendale has right now that can bring additional income without having a levy placed in front of the residents. So that's a way to have additional revenue brought in to fix some of the problems. Because today, Mike provided a great perspective on where we are in the budget and so forth. I look at it a little more holistically in terms of the net worth of the village. In the last 5 years, the net worth of the village, which is the liquid assets that we have in the village, our assets, have been down 15% in the last 5 years. In that same period, give you a S&P 500, has grown 102%. So Glendale, the value of Glendale basically is going down based on the income and the revenue that we're bringing in to be able to support our community. So we need a way to not stay even, because everything that Mike mentioned is we're going to stay even. We're going to fix the roads, we're going to have roads, but we're not making any improvements to get us back as a thriving community, which we need to be a thriving community, not just surviving, because
We are
today we're
only
surviving.
one of 4 communities within Hamilton County that do not charge a income tax. Visiting that would, we don't need to increase the taxes on what we already have, but take a look at the communities around us and the job they're able to do because of an income tax. That's going to fairly impact each and every citizen here.
Those who cannot afford to pay an income tax probably don't have that much of an income and probably wouldn't need to pay a tax. So again, according to the slides that were presented to us in the last meeting, these homes have to sell at a value of $800,000 in order to draw the amount of money that Mr. Lundstrom showed on those slides. What happens if if President Biden's new law goes into, his bill passes, in which communities can no longer zone for, have exclusive zoning rights, and we have to build low-income, affordable family multi-unit homes? And in the article I read, it was referenced, in the national article was referenced, Mason, Ohio as an example, would no longer exist with the different zoning laws. So again, I'm just asking you, please, can we just drop this and get back to, let's fix what we can fix. Mr. Beissel's list was really long, and again, consider an income tax so that we can be as nice as look at Sharonville, Springdale, where their roads are drivable. Thank you.
I'm going to take one more question, and then I want to close off the public discussion and let the board discuss this among themselves for a bit. Is there one more question? Ron, go ahead. Okay.
Yeah, my name is Dan Hood. We've only been here about 7 years also. Has anyone done any study as to what that many homes would do to our current infrastructure? The added everything that comes from another house will do to what we're already trying to repair?
I don't think it negatively affects what we have currently, but again, this hasn't gone far enough down the path to have any facts like that around it.
Right, but you do see what I'm saying, right? You're going to add homes to something that's not working.
What's it do to water infrastructure? What's it do to stormwater runoff, et cetera?
I just want to put it out there.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to ask that the public comment period be closed for now. I'm inviting board members, if they wish to make any comments or discussion among ourselves.
Just to finish my point was that there is a lot going on in the village. There is a lot of work that needs to be done. Most of it's on a schedule. It's going to cost money, and a lot of the funding exists. I agree with Mr. Johnson's comment earlier that something like this is not going to solve financial issues. It's a drop in the bucket compared to a normal budget. And a year or 2 years from now, when it's time for the levy, I hope everyone can support it because it's good for Glendale.
Okay. Any comments from the board? Or are we commented out? I want to thank everybody for coming here, for sharing their thoughts with us. I hope most people feel that this has been a good, productive discussion, hearing different viewpoints from a lot of different people, new issues being raised, and we are going to look for answers to some of the questions. I'm going to ask the board just for some thinking as to what, at some point we need to make a decision here and decide whether and what we're going to pass along to council. And I'm wondering if there is some thought as to what additional information we might need. Are there key questions that have been raised? I think I have a couple that have been raised that we should address, but I'd like to hear from the board on that.
Well, I'll give you my viewpoint. I'm not been on one specific parcel of land or another. I think, you know, as I proposed that we ought to look at Summit Park before, and of course, came back in Summit Park, we have some restrictions on a good portion of it. I think we ought to look at, you know, we've got Landmark, and we don't own Landmark, but I think we ought to revisit what are the opportunities there, and even if it was one of the opportunities that we would propose to council, that maybe we ought to offer to buy 10 or 12 acres of the land that's in Landmark that is right on Chester Road where the baseball fields are today as a potential development site, just like we had before a long time ago when a proposal came in front of council. And, you know, the developers were kind of scared away with the inability of council to really come to a decision. So my thoughts is before we present anything to council, I think we ought to explore, I think a few member in the audience pointed that out. Is there anything that we could potentially do at Landmark? Could we approach Landmark on what if scenarios as, you know, other avenues? And if Landmark is not a good proposal, then we have this parcel of land here in the corner as another proposal. So just my thoughts on that.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, that was one of my questions, actually. Thanks, Mike, for bringing it up. At the last meeting, at the end of the meeting, there was some discussion about getting together with, I think, the pastor and his real estate representative who have come before council before. Was there ever a meeting about that?
That has not been done yet. It is definitely on my list to do, and I will bump it up on the priority, my priorities.
I was just curious about where that was.
Real quick, you know, I think it strikes me that the consensus here is we'd like to have this housing that would allow people to move out of big houses into, and I won't get into the development of what the price would be, but I think that's a good one. Question is where? And Landmark is a very logical place. I'm not so sure. I don't know enough about the layout of Summit to know if it's possible there. But to me, you know, we got to find a place. It'd be great to find a place like that. And if it's either Landmark or potentially somewhere around Summit, and maybe we need to investigate where the optimal place is if there were room at Summit.
From my perspective, when this topic came up for this type of housing, and it sounds like it's a good idea to have this type of housing, there's some desire for it. I don't think there's space on Summit for something like that, and I prefer, you know, that is a park with some amenities that is used by people. When the idea of this parcel came up, the only thing that struck me as interesting about it was, as long as I've lived here, that the back section of that property, and I'll just walk up and point to it. This whole section has never been utilized. Now, trees, yes. Green space, yes. But I've been here 25 years, and I've never seen this anything but overgrowth. And, okay, it has been used. No, that's right here.
That's right there.
That's right here. It's further up. This section goes all the way back and touches the Vineyard Church property. And that's, well, it's called buffer. I understand it's called buffer. So in reaching for, is there some way to satisfy all needs and then be able to do something with the front part of that and make it more of a usable park? We've had buffer all over the village. You know, at one point, this was buffer, and at one point, all of this was buffer. Well, it's not anymore, right? It's private property, but it was buffer. The whole there's several sections of Glendale that were buffer before, and now it's not. So anyway, that seemed like, does this look like it's not being used by anyone in the village? It is buffer, I understand. Is there a higher and better use for it? And that was what was interesting when this subject came up to me. So. Okay.
More village money to do that.
Okay, I'm really want to hear from the board here for this.
So those are my thoughts.
Okay. Anyone else on the board? I'm looking for just key issues that for the next meeting, and I'm going to ask you when we should meet again also. But for the next meeting, what should we really be focusing on to try to, now, one thing is to contact Landmark, see if there's any opportunity there to purchase land or even to just encourage a developer to bid on the land for residential development. I know that up till now, most of that land has been targeted as light industrial or other types of commercial real estate. But is that still an option? So we will follow up on that.
Go ahead. I don't want to interrupt. Are you finished talking about Landmark?
I'm taking a breath, so go ahead.
I don't want to interrupt you. One of the issues that was brought up at the last meeting, again, this has to do with the numbers that David has put together and, on the slides. And I think Ms. Oldridge has brought this up too, is that a realtor at the last meeting pointed out that these homes, the luxury homes, the $600,000 to $800,000 homes, I know that's just a projection. But based on that projection, comes the annual, revenue generated by those homes. But, how realistic is that? And I'd like to see some numbers that show something at a little bit more modest level. I mean, I don't see $600,000 to $800,000 homes there if people are downsizing to that space. And so I think more realistic numbers would be appreciated, more about not whether they're going to generate $74,000 to $96,000 a year, but if you're talking about a home that's $200,000 to $400,000, what are those numbers? I would like to see that.
Well, speaking as a member of the committee who actually has a vote for a change, when I'm mayor, I don't get to vote except on rare occasions. I agree. I would like to see some projections based upon lower pricing and just see what that would mean to the village. Obviously, it would mean somewhat less revenue from tax, but it's still, that's, as I've said before, I'm going to keep saying it, and money is not the reason I'm doing this. I'm doing this to provide good housing for people who have lived in Glendale, love Glendale, and want to be able to stay here and find they can't. So that's where my head's at, and I would welcome some thoughts or projections about different price points and price ranges for the homes there.
Don, I'm like Jody, as she said, I'm of two minds. I certainly recognize the need for downsize or transitional housing somewhere in the village. Whether this is the proper place, again, I'm of two minds, because I certainly appreciate the value of green space generally and value of a green belt, if you want to call this a green belt. I always remember as a kid coming home from Florida, the first image you get of the city of Cincinnati coming through the cut in the hill, you're home when you see that skyline. Same thing when you're coming off of Chester, coming into Glendale, you're home when you hit that green belt. So I have some very strong trepidations about eliminating at least this part of the green belt. Again, trying to balance the need for transitional housing. I'm wondering, and this is something for further discussion, maybe not even at the next meeting, but for the next few years, of whether there are opportunities scattered throughout the community for smaller transitional housing. Two examples come to my mind. One was Dr. Sawyer has some property, at least he had some property in the vicinity of Brandywine. He came to the Planning Commission 10 years ago, let's say, with an idea to put some condos or some attached housing. It just didn't fit there because our zoning didn't allow it. It was not enough space or the setbacks didn't work. So I'm wondering if we need to do a deeper dive into our zoning code to allow some flexibility for that particular situation. Another example, still in the same neighborhood, is the Creekwood condominiums. They have, if you look at a map, they have a huge bit of green space. They were required by our zoning to reserve that as green space, never to develop it. But might that be an opportunity for attached or smaller detached houses for downsized housing? I don't know. And there's got to be a dozen other examples throughout the community, combining lots, maybe tearing down a smaller house and combining backyards. Just an opportunity to be creative. Again, that's not going to be done for our next meeting, but it's something I think that deserves a closer look.
Thank you. One thing that I would like to just get on the table and to get it off the table, is there anybody on this board who has any thought in their mind of developing the Oak Street Greenbelt?
No, absolutely not.
So, Okay,
No.
and that's, this is the thing, this has come up from
Yeah.
time to time.
No.
And, oh, you're opening the door, you're, so slippery slope and all that. But at the end of the day, there is nobody who is thinking about doing development there at this point. And it's very frankly, all of the plans in the village, Mike omitted one of the things that we've been looking at, which is turning the Greenbelt into a real, the Oak Street Greenbelt into a real amenity and having a lot of, and having walking trails and parkours and benches and things like that in there. And everything that we do there is going to be with a view towards making permanent improvements that will not involve any kind of housing development there. So I just want to get that out on the table. If I did, it was to say that we weren't going to do it. That's certainly what I meant to say. So if I misspoke or didn't communicate well, I apologize for that. Okay, look, I wanted to raise one thing there, and that's all, that's as far as I'm going to go at this point. But anyway, at least this board, and I'm confident that council feels the same way, has no intention of developing the Oak Street Greenbelt. With that, I would like to try to get a date for our next meeting. So if we pull out our smartphones or whatever we have, and I'm looking at June. And it looks to me like, the weeks of the 14th and the 21st are in pretty good shape for me. Anyone have vacation plans or anything?
Which date?
Well, let's start with just the weeks in general. Well, okay, let's take it the Wednesday, or say Tuesday of those, Tuesday or Wednesday, either the 15th or 16th, or the 22nd and 23rd.
I'm out of town 15th and 16th, but the second week is fine.
22 and 23. 22, 23, I can do that. I'm okay there.
That's fine with me, 22 or 23.
Okay. How about 22?
Great.
All right.
That's good.
Good.
Same time, Don?
Yeah, 5 o'clock. Gives people who work a chance to get here. So that's a good thing. I don't know that I don't know that this board is going to have many more meetings on this. I think at some point we're going to vote and put it to council, and I'm sure council is used to 7 o'clock meetings, so they'll, yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay, as has been said at one point, we must make some concessions to the shortness of human life. So there will be opportunity to present, at least at this, at the meeting in June. Okay. Okay. You'll have a chance to say what you want to say at the next meeting.
Ron, I think the agenda showed the format for tonight. And I really think this board was responding to a request from the community to have an open town hall style meeting about this. And I think that's what we tried to provide.
So you mean more addressing council versus the CIC?
For CIC.
For council?
For council or for GCIC? I thought it was about this topic, that there was a request for town hall. Okay. We did try. We did try to put out a request and that allowed over an hour. We allocated an hour for public comment, and we ended up, I think, doing about at least an hour and a half. So that's what we tried. That's what we tried to achieve within the bounds of what we could do here and managing time. So if the idea is that council should do more town hall meetings about what it does, that's a whole other topic. This is the board of directors of the Community Improvement Corporation. We have no say on that, really. Some of us do. Obviously, some of us do. Unless there's anything else from the board, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay.